This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next-day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Pro Savings Days are back at Lowe's. My Lowe's Pro Rewards members save even more with limited-time doorbuster deals. Save $5 on 24-count Contractor's Choice 42-gallon trash bags, now just $14.78. Plus, get your choice select DeWalt Elite Series saw blades for $9.98. Not a Pro Rewards member? Join for free today at Lowe's. Valid through 9/17. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowes.com/terms for details. Subject to change.
We all know those GLP-1 injections work wonders, but that price tag almost gave me a heart attack when my insurance denied coverage. I was staring at a choice between paying my mortgage or paying for weight loss. Talk about a rock and a hard place. Then I found Elevate Health compounded semaglutide at just $58 with payment plans that don't require a second mortgage. Same medication, same results, but a price that real folks can actually afford. Visit joinelevate.com today. That's JOINELEVATE.com. Your wallet will be as happy as your waistline. This medication is not FDA approved.
Welcome to The Shabby Detective, yet another Columbo podcast. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me, of course, is Mr. Chris Dashew.
Do you have a light? I can't seem to find my lighter. I need to light these cigars, and I don't have a way to do it. My brother got them for my cousin or somebody who totally, I promise, exists.
I might even call you out on that this time, Columbo.
I know. Boy, what was that all about in the closing moments of this episode? Jeez Louise. Columbo not nearly as smart as he thinks.
That woman, oh my God. We live in a post-Me Too era, so this whole idea of not believing a woman, boy, oh boy, does this ring a little harsh. But even back in like the 90s and stuff when I watched this, I was so frustrated watching this episode. And just for fuck's sakes, would you guys listen to Suzanne Pleshette? It is going to do you right.
No, we need to listen to that smarmy man himself, Mr. Eddie Albert. Doesn't he just look like a dickhead? I've never seen Green Acres. I know what it's about, more or less, but I've never watched it. The character he plays on Green Acres, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, nothing like this character.
A little. I mean, he's conceited. Though I always found him looking down his nose at all of the local yokels and just being, I mean, we talk also, for folks that don't know, we talk a lot about Barty Miller and how Barty Miller is the straight man to all the lunatics that are in the precinct. And Eddie Albert is basically that in Green Acres. He's got the crazy wife. He's got the crazy neighbors. He's got, everybody around him is a weirdo, and he's that calm center of the world, but he gets flustered sometimes.
In this episode, he just looks like the most smarmy dickhead. They do a really good thing in this show. They've done it in every episode so far, really, where they accentuate how much of a rich piece of shit this person is. And unabashedly thinks they can get away with everything. This episode, probably more so than everything else, is just like, yeah, I can do whatever I want. Like, shoot someone in my house in broad daylight.
Broad daylight, blinds open, guns everywhere.
He has a house that is essentially, folks, if you've never seen this episode, which you should, it has a wall of windows, that the kind that only rich people like Eddie Albert's major general character could afford to live in California. Even though this is supposed to be 71, this is high fucking living. There has always been this kind of dichotomy in this show between the haves and the have-nots, because this is a show about a have-not going after the haves, because of everybody so far, and I'm assuming everybody for the most part, is a rich scumbag or a socialite or something. So yeah, I mean, this is the most brazen I think we've seen so far. I mean, even more so than kidnapping your writing partner kind of in broad daylight. He just murders this guy in broad daylight. And he's like, yeah, so what? Like, fucking prove it.
And then keeps the body in the house behind a secret passageway. I love it.
Yeah, it's very Colonel Mustard in the auditorium. It's just like, this is the first time where the character is he's almost mustache twirling. I think he's like one step away, really.
So the episode we're talking about is Dead Weight. It was directed by Jack Smite, who has directed just a ton of things. I mostly know him from Damnation Alley. Written by John T. Duggan. Released October 27th, 1971. And yeah, we've talked about Eddie Albert is Major General Martin Hollister. He is a former, well, I guess once you're in the Marine Corps, you're probably always in the Marine Corps, but he is a war hero. I'm guessing from maybe Korea, I think, or World War II, maybe?
I'm going to go with Korea. So if this is 71, Korea.
He's older than Bert, and Bert does talk about how he was in the big one, WW2. So it feels like maybe...
I don't know what Bert was in, man. Hoy. I don't know if I trust Bert. I don't know if I trust Bert's chopping skills on lettuce any more than I trust what he has to say about the wars that he was in.
That would have been 30 years or 25 years prior, I guess.
If any man in recent memory may be said to have had charisma, certainly that man was General Martin J. Hollister. Early on in the Korean War, as a colonel commanding a regiment of armored cavalry, Hollister captured the imagination of the American people. His courage, his brilliance in improvising in the heat of battle, his colorful garb, riding breeches, boots, and pearl-handled Colt 45 soon earned him the nickname the Iron Horseman.
Taking the world by storm and becoming this war hero until he got shot and had to be removed from service.
The entire episode hinges on a gun, coincidentally. The entire episode hinges on this little old revolver of his that he used to fight back the bad guys, indeterminate bad guys.
So he ends up killing one of his, I guess, former men, Colonel Roger Dutton, played by John Kerr.
Somebody works with in the private sector.
Yeah, and they are involved in some sort of vague chicanery.
It's like a bid scandal. So he just, as opposed to going with the best bidder, he went with the lowest bidder, who was his buddy, on some defense contract job. I mean, that's believable, right?
Oh, fuck yeah. It's
that shit's happening. Yeah, this shit's happening all the time. That, for me, it's surprising that it's taken 5 episodes to get to the point where they're doing white-collar crime. Because this is the first, white-collar crime, really, that pushes the murder, at least.
And I don't know if Columbo really ever figures out the crime, the white-collar crime. It feels like he is just about who committed the murder.
Even John Kerr says at the beginning of the episode, he's like, it'll take them a while to figure out what's going on. And this all kind of takes place the way Columbo normally does, at least, in 2 or 3 days. So it's, the whole, actual fraud, there's no way for Columbo to figure that out. Which I think is more impressive that Columbo solves the crime. Columbo gets a little bit of a deus ex machina in this episode, a little more so than he has before with the discovery of the body.
So much of this is about the witness, and we meet the witness before we see Columbo. The witness is Suzanne Pleshette as Helen Stewart. Suzanne Pleshette, who I mostly just know as the wife of Bob Newhart on the Bob Newhart Show. Of course, she was in a bunch of other things, but that was the role for her for so many years. I know she was in The Birds and other things, but yeah, that was her big thing.
She didn't have to work after that show, let's put it that way.
She sees what happens, sees the general murder this guy, John Kerr. And her mother is on this little boat with her, doesn't see it. And basically the whole rest of the episode is, one, trying to get people to believe her. And then two, Eddie Albert figuring out who she is and pretty much stalking her and trying to convince her that he's such a nice guy that there's no way he could have murdered somebody.
Can I point something out here? Just if you know anyone in your life who says, I'm such a nice person, I could never murder anyone. I said this to my wife earlier today, and I genuinely believe this. I genuinely believe anyone could murder someone. If pushed in the right way, the right amount, right? I mean, is that really that hard to believe? I think more people are susceptible than others, but I think realistically anyone could be pushed to murder if they felt that they were being threatened sufficiently, be it realistically or completely concocted in their mind. So I don't like this idea in this episode that this is the driving force is, you're a woman and we don't believe you. Like, I really don't like that as someone who has a true crime adjacent podcast. Like, women are normally the ones who are being preyed upon in these situations, and literally you have it in this episode. Eddie Albert is preying upon this woman because he's trying to convince her otherwise. I'm frankly surprised that she didn't get murdered the way that woman did in the episode with the writing, where she gets fucking clubbed to death with a champagne bottle. What I assumed was going to happen, because they kind of hinted at it, I think, or foreshadowed it and didn't pay it off. I assumed that she was going to be in a accident in the boat, because they keep mentioning how her mom mentions it even, and the guy who, the idiot at the dock who just tells, and the fucking worst asshole on the planet who just tells everybody anything they want to know. Oh, hey, Judge, what do you need? I'll just give it to you without even asking what you need it for. They keep saying like she's a really bad driver of the boat, so I assumed Eddie Albert was going to make it look like she died. But it doesn't go there, and frankly, it's going to sound terrible, I would have preferred that, because the fact that the episode goes all in on her is not really a compelling episode. For me, this is a very weak episode of this show, because it goes the wrong direction.
I will tell you flat out, this is one of my least favorite episodes
of the show in its entirety. That's fucking wild. This is the third episode of the show, technically.
Once we get into the reboot, we're going to have a lot of clunkers, but during the first few years of the show, this one for me is the one, like, which is tough for me because this is the second and last time that we see Bert. And I fucking love Bert.
That's it?
That's it, which is a real shame, right? Because he's kind of his Watson in this. This whole like,
hey, Lieutenant, how goes it? So, huh? How about a bowl of chili?
Bert, give me some chili.
There you go. Coming right up, Lieutenant. Got the best in town, you know.
You got a match?
Sure. Let me get this chili to you. There you go, your crackers. There you go. Hope you're sick. How you like that coffee?
What's this?
Is that black?
What it is?
That's my helmet from the war.
No war.
What war? World War II. My wife says I can never throw anything out. So the other day she put her foot down. She says either Joan goes or she goes.
You decided to keep her.
It was a tough decision. Anyway, I brought all my war trophies over here. Hey, wait a minute. You're one guy that can appreciate this. I'll get you another bowl of chili. My chili is good no matter what it is. Here. Yeah, I got this, that. Look at this. I got saved the Japanese stirring spoon. I got it in the Okinawa, the commissary. Yeah. Oh, well. You know, I guess my wife is right. I can't give anything away. Especially when it means something to you.
My God, Timothy Carey, it's like they told him to ad-lib, or he chose to ad-lib, which is probably more the choice, and he just will not shut up, which I love. Like when Columbo goes to make the phone call and you still hear Bert just prattling on, or when he he brings out something. He's just like, oh, don't worry, I'll get you a new bowl of chili. And he just keeps talking about like how he fucked up this last bowl and stuff. And I'm like, wow, he runs so hot in this episode. Peter Falk, being a friend of his, is like very tolerant. But I think even after a while, it feels like Falk is like, okay, that's enough, Tim.
Right, give me a dime.
Okay, Lieutenant. There you go. Let me give you that bowl of chili I dropped on you. Is that cream and sugar in that coffee?
There are photos of him and Peter Falk together, and like that's one of the few, like, looks like somebody like screen grabbed it from the episode and uploaded it. And it speaks to how big of a presence he has in this episode with one scene.
Two scenes.
Yeah, you're right. 2 scenes. 2 scenes, and what? This is his 3rd scene in the show. He gets 3 scenes in the show overall, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Because we only saw him the other time 1 time.
Now you will see me one more time if you do good. You'll see me 2 more times if you do bad.
In this episode, yeah, I forget, yeah, because there is that early on scene. And the early on scene is the thing with him chopping the lettuce. And there's that shot from above where it's Timothy Carey, like, just taking a cleaver and just running. I know how to cook. And I know I don't know how much you cook, but I know that you know how people cook.
Yes.
Because you watch Iron Chef, and that is not how you do that. It's like, for me, it's like when you watch people playing video games and movies, it's like, you don't have to convince me you don't know what you're doing, because you've done a pretty good job of it right now. Like, your attempts to convince me have failed woefully. But Timothy Carey, he almost steals the entire episode out from underneath. To be fair, this episode's not that good to begin with, so maybe it's okay that he kind of is this weird kind of, like, again, iconoclastic presence that he kind of has anyways. But I appreciate him being here, because otherwise, it's like, what, Eddie Albert just being a fuck creep for 45 minutes? It doesn't even feel like Columbo's in this episode very much, to be perfectly honest with you, because they give so much to Suzanne Pleshette. They really do.
Yeah, he shows up pretty early in here, which is surprising. And I was also surprised that he doesn't really interact too much with that guy you mentioned before, the guy that rented her the boat. This guy, Val Avery, he will be back several times. He is one of these character actors that I think he and Falk got along, and he is in, I want to say 4 more episodes. And by the way, Timothy Carey will be back one more time, but not as Bert. He will be running a restaurant, but as Tony, which is kind of a shame. I wish that he was Bert. So yet another food-based character, though.
I don't know why they didn't look at Timothy Carey and say he could be a villain on this show.
Oh, God, he would have been amazing.
I mean, just have him be like a mob-adjacent guy. I don't know. Or a mob pretender. I don't know.
He's not a rich asshole. He's not that Eddie Albert character.
Well, but I'm saying, like, if you were like a mob-adjacent guy, you could be like some seafood king who has mob ties or something. I don't know. I mean, something to that. I mean, what do you work in? I work in seafood, like, whatever. Scrod is great this year.
He could have been a good victim.
Yeah, he could play a real kind of, I mean, because that's the other thing. Timothy Carey has either a really menacing presence or he can play the real hangdog real well. So yeah, maybe he's just like the down on his luck. Who knows, right? I just don't know when you see him in this episode and you go, this guy needs to be in this show more. Like, nah, we don't need to revisit this interaction between these two characters. It's weird that they revisited it to begin with, to be perfectly honest with you. Isn't it? It's kind of strange, right?
I don't know. I liked it, but
I mean, it's just, I mean more to the fact of we haven't seen him in 3 episodes. So they take like 3 episodes and then he just comes back and then he never comes back again. That is kind of weird.
Though I think Columbo might eat chili in other episodes.
It's not eating Bert's chili, goddammit.
That's right. Bert makes the best chili.
As long as he's not putting lettuce in it. There was this moment in the episode where Columbo is looking through the box that Eddie Albert is packing, and they do something really, Jack Smite does something really funny, where you are completely on board with the fact that there is probably, you think that the guy's dead body is in there. I love how, like, much tension there is in that scene, because Eddie Albert already knows there's nothing in there. But we as the audience aren't in on that yet, because we never saw where he hid the body. And so they play that scene perfectly, where it's like, but it's not there, never mind. And it's like, you get to kind of be part of the process that Columbo is going through as well, because he wanted to see inside the box as well, obviously.
Oh, what's in the box?
Get that weird fisheye shot of Columbo at one point. I'm like, where the hell did this come from? It was one of those where I was like, did I just see that? And had to back it up and rewatch it. And just this, I think it was right around the time that he was looking inside of Eddie Albert's place. And there's a close-up of him that's really super distorted. Like it's a fisheye lens, or at least a very wide angle lens.
I mean, hey, they did the glasses thing last episode. Is that, they're just like, we gotta do something weird every episode. We gotta do something strange.
The one reason why you might not remember that Bert is in that earlier sequence is because Columbo is at Bert's at fucking 11 o'clock at night when they're doing the news report. The news report that Eddie Albert told Suzanne Pleshette, hey, watch the news tonight at 11. You'll see what a nice guy I am, or what kind of person I am. And then we get the one actor, Cleet Roberts, I think, who just plays newscasters in almost everything that he was in. I mostly know him as being the newscaster from The Jerk and the newscaster or interviewer from MASH, when they would occasionally do an episode where someone would come in and interview the guys that are the surgeons from MASH, and he was the guy. He would always show up. Like, if you look at his credits, it is almost all TV newsman, TV anchorman, TV reporter.
Hey, so you know what they say? Somebody had to have that career.
He did a good job with it.
He looks the part. I mean, I think it's that mustache. It's that goddamn mustache. It's one of those perfect kind of Ron Burgundy anchorman from the 70s. He looks the part, right? Some actors some don't want to be typecast, and some are just like, you need a newscaster? I got the mustache trimmed and ready to go. Yeah, call good old Cleet Roberts. He'll be there for you.
Columbo, does the guy sleep? I mean, he's hanging out at Bert's at 11. I mean, like, I guess Bert's maybe stays open all night or something, but why aren't you at home, Columbo? Why aren't you watching the news with your wife?
Columbo does have a wife. What is it Suzanne Pleshette questions him on? Like,
That's just the way my niece Marilyn felt after her divorce. Now she's got a new husband. As a matter of fact, he's a cop, and they got 6 kids.
Lieutenant, I mean, just between us, would you tell me the truth? Do you really have a niece?
Well, what kind of a question is that? Do I really have a niece?
Well, do you?
Of course I've got a niece. My wife's sister's girl, Cynthia.
I was a little disappointed, actually, by the investigation aspects, the how Ketchum parts of this episode. Because, again, when it's all about Suzanne Plechette's testimony about her being a first-hand witness, like, I don't really fucking care about Eddie Albert and Suzanne Pleshette, because their chemistry is not... He looks too old.
He is, like, grandfatherly to her.
I'm not an ageist. I'm not saying if you're an older guy, you can't be with a younger woman. But in this episode, it's hard to believe that. The fact that he's going after her, it should feel like you understand why he's doing it, because he wants to make sure that you don't say something untoward about him seeing him murder someone. It's like, why are you being so stupid? It's like, it's almost unrealistic writing at how dumb they expect your character to be.
So just for the record, he was born 1906, Eddie Albert. She was born 1937. So 31-year age difference. So I guess more father than grandfather.
Eddie Albert in this episode is not the smooth-faced gentleman of Green Acres. He is a much older man. If you're the characters in this episode, you should understand, his motivation makes sense because you supposedly saw him murder someone. It's like, I want to show you how good of a guy I am. It's like, nobody who does this is a good guy. Nobody who does this is believably a good person.
Well, I kept wondering, is he going to try to marry her so she can't testify against him? Because towards the end, they're about to go on a trip, and it feels like, okay, yeah, to your point, will she be going for a long swim on that trip?
And then, if she dies with him, do you not just be like, you did it, because there was suspicion because of this woman, her testimony, there's suspicion on you about this murder, and now she dies while she's with you. We're taking you in. All the other episodes, the villain's motivation has made sense, but why he leaves her alive, it makes zero sense.
For me, so much of the fun is the tension between Columbo and the villain. And we don't get a lot of scenes of them together. One of the first times we see Columbo, he is waiting by the dock when Eddie Albert comes back after dumping the body.
And he did that overnight. He did it late, and he was back early in the morning. He was coming in as other people were going out. That's how early he was back.
Ahoy, Lieutenant. You're an early bird.
Oh, yes, sir.
Be right with you.
Yeah. I'm just, combining a little business with pleasure.
At this hour?
Well, George, my brother-in-law George.
Yeah?
Oh, you don't know him. But at any rate, he's a fantastic fisherman, this man, and he told me that the best time to catch anything is around about now. He says, get there before everybody, and you kind of catch the fish off guard.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't look like it worked.
Not yet, but I'm going to keep trying.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you'll catch anything big around here, Lieutenant. You're too close in.
Oh? Yeah, you're probably right.
Now, I've got to change. So if there's anything else I can do for you...
No, that'll be all, sir.
Fine. Just a piece of advice. Find a different spot. Or use a different bait. Otherwise, you're not going to catch anything, Lieutenant.
I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of a nice line, but had that been done maybe 20 minutes more into the episode where they have more of a back and forth, because there's different modes of Columbo villains for me. There's the very helpful villain, the one who, like what we saw last time. The writer.
Robert. Okay, and I would say Robert Culp a little. Robert Culp,
yeah. Hey, let me hire you.
Right? Yeah. But definitely the writing one where he's like, "Here, take all these books, and we'll solve this together." Like, yeah.
Oddly, Mrs. Melville books are inside of Eddie Albert's a house. If you look around, you can actually see them on the shelves, which is great. But yeah, the Jack Cassidy just like, hey, yeah, Mrs. Melville, she would have told you this, da-da-da-da-da. And even, Culp, like, oh, hey, let me hire you. You're such a great detective. And then you get your Lee Grant, who is openly hostile to him. Eddie Albert doesn't feel like either. It doesn't feel like he and Columbo really have a back and forth type relationship through so much of this. I mean, you get that little quip about, oh, you're fishing in the wrong spot kind of thing. But
he's there fishing and fishing.
He hasn't been fishing for very long at this point, and he should have been trying different tacks to unravel the alibi, and he really doesn't have an alibi. Basically, like, oh, it was me in my uniform. I was trying it on before I sent all this stuff over to the museum.
That for me was the biggest, like, come on. Every other time we've seen someone talking about the reason they were maybe seen in an uncompromising position or a compromising position, they have been able to get themselves out of it. Here it's like, I was walking around in my uniform with my gun out and I fell forward. Like,
right.
Does this sound unbelievable to you? Like, yes, actually. Because like, again, a lot of the villains, like you've mentioned before, it's kind of like, that could never happen. This is like, you're right. No, it couldn't. You're right. Like, that is more unbelievable than just you murdering them.
And he doesn't have that moment where it's like, oh, look at Lieutenant, I was over here and this happened. And now if you go outside and you look in, it might look like this. Like, he takes Suzanne Pleshette out on the boat and it was like, oh, look at my house. Oh, you can't fucking see anything in my windows. Look at the
reflection.
Yeah. And it's like, well, it's not overcast.
It was the reflection is the glare, I guess, right? Yeah.
And again, they didn't really kind of explain that. I'm like, no, well, you should have, like, Columbo should have said, well, it was a very overcast day that day or something. It's like he'll do that. He'll like call up the Weather Bureau and find out exactly how cloudy or what the temperature was. And there's some things that he does in this where he's like, oh, well, I checked in on this or that. And like, obviously they check the gun and everything before he pulls it out of the cabinet. But again, it should have been like more things to do with that gun. Like, there should have been something to really prove, like, this is not a replica like you said it was. This is the real thing. And there should have been some sort of like, see this notch here. You made this notch in this gun after you met, I don't know, Patton or something, or a, somebody from Japan shot at you and it, like, they've got the book that took a bullet. So they should have had something else where it was like, this for sure is the gun.
Further reinforce how important the gun is. Honestly, again, they should have made more of the story run through the gun, because that's the way they've done these stories before, is it kind of runs through a thing or an item or something. There's some gimmick, and the gimmick in this was this fucking gun. But they don't even introduce it until like halfway through on top of everything else. It's odd. I liked the idea of this episode. I think Eddie Albert, if they had given him more of a characterization than they did, could have really been a nasty one. But he just kind of is limp. He's just kind of a eh.
Oh, that's what Columbo checks on, is the tides. He figures out where the body could have been because of the tides. Sorry, I just had to interject.
They don't make him... He didn't want to get away badly enough to kill Suzanne Pleshette, so why was he doing any of this to begin with, is the way I look at it. Like with the Jack Cassidy episode, I believe he wanted to get away with it, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get away with it. Like, you murder someone, you should be willing to murder someone else if that person is going to find you out. I mean, that's the characters in these shows. You've already mentioned it in one of the episodes where there's the murder that's planned, and then there's the murder of convenience or happenstance or because they have to. This was like primed for that, and they just kind of said, nah, never mind. Like,
they could have done a reverse of Murder by the Book. The first murder is planned to a T, and the murder of the woman is a crime of passion, a crime of necessity. And this one starts with a crime of passion, and it should have been like, okay, well, that fucked me up, but I'm going to plan this death of Suzanne Pleshette down to, the last detail. This is my perfect murder. The first one was my screw up, but that would have been a nice way to play that in reverse.
It would have provided an interesting opportunity to maybe see more of Eddie Albert just doing his own thing. Because that's the other thing, like, we don't even really get to see him kind of on his own. Like, he's always around Suzanne Pleshette or around Columbo, and it's like, some of those better moments from the last episodes have been when they're kind of just like doing their own thing and just kind of fucking around and being weird. Because again, that's the thing about all these villains. They're all very strange and they're all kind of weird and idiosyncratic. And then you come to Eddie Albert and it's just like, I killed him because I guess that was the other thing that I kind of was a little disappointed by. Because like you mentioned, it's a crime of passion. And a lot of the other ones, like the Robert Culp episode, I would argue is also a crime of passion, more so, right? Because it's a fucking accident, frankly. In this, it's like, so I don't trust that you're going to keep your mouth shut, so I'm going to kill you and draw suspicion to myself. I don't know, like, this very weak. It's very weak, given that everybody else is like, I understand why you're doing this. Like, the doctor who kills his wife, like, he wants to be with his mistress. I fucking get it. Lee Grant wants to kill her husband because she's fucking sick and tired of him. Like,
Wants that money, too.
Yeah, wants the money, sick and tired of him, whatever. Like, but this is like, you were gonna rat maybe, but you said you weren't. I killed you anyways. Like,
I keep harping on that whole thing about, you're fishing in the wrong spot. There's no moment where Albert is able to show his superiority to Columbo and humiliate him. There's almost always a moment of, gosh, you funny little man, you're coming around here digging into all this stuff, and there's a simple explanation and X, Y, and Z, and you are a real piece of work, Columbo. Basically, you suck. And maybe I do this in front of your superiors, or I attack you in the news or something, but nope. He is so concerned about his appearance that he just wants to keep this as quiet as possible, just keeps lurking and hitting on Suzanne Pleshette to the point where she now is like, oh, well, no, he's totally innocent and I must have been wrong. And that, again, that could have been interesting if he's doing some sort of like, Stockholm syndrome type thing on her. But no, it doesn't become that interesting because that Columbo knows the truth. The only thing I found interesting about this one, other than Bert, of course, is that Columbo doesn't believe her when he first meets her. And it takes a minute or two before Columbo finally realizes, oh, wait, no, she's telling the truth. And then he becomes an ally. But then she starts to fall under Eddie Albert's ways and starts to turn against Columbo. And again, that could have been interesting. And she could have started to cover up things just to keep Columbo away from this man that she's falling in love with.
So, in every other episode, when Columbo gets to the crime scene, does he already know who's done it? Because, like, in this episode, how the hell could he have known? And, like, that's my problem maybe overall with this episode is, on the other episodes, I kind of understand how he knows, just his intuition, maybe his gut feeling. This is just like, how did you actually know?
He makes a big deal about that lighter and about, like, lighting his cigar. And that becomes the line later on where he's like, you couldn't even get rid of your lighter. How are you going to get rid of your pearl-handled gun?
It's a fucking cool lighter. I wouldn't get rid of it either. You're making a big deal out of an actual useful item. Like in the 70s, like my mom still has her parents' table lighters. Like that's not a thing anymore anyways. And like, yeah, that would have been a thing, especially in the 70s when everybody's puffing on fucking cigarettes and cigars. Like they're going out of style.
Kind of to poke a hole here, he does get rid of the gun. The gun is in the museum.
He doesn't have it on him.
Had that gun actually been a replica and he kept the original rather than making up the story about how it got pilfered, then that would have been a real, pardon the pun, but smoking gun. Like, oh, you couldn't get rid of that gun. You put the replica in here, but you had to keep the real thing. You never lost that gun. Nobody ever stole that from you. Because I saw a photo of you with that gun taken just 2 years ago, so many years after you said that it was stolen when you were in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. Like, put it all together. Make it airtight, Columbo, or at least get us to that point where we know that this guy's going to go down. Meanwhile, you get these two guys that show up at the museum and come and almost cuff him. And Columbo's just got the gun, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the gun that you used to murder that guy, and you're gonna have to trust me that I know that this is the case.
Remember the whole thing about the thing in front of the fireplace? And that's what he used to weigh the body down? So let's just point this out here, because you want to poke a fucking hole. He hasn't gotten rid of the body yet, correct?
Correct.
Columbo points out that those things are gone. And so, even knowing that Columbo mentioned that they're gone, and that he has taken note of the fact that they are gone, Eddie Albert goes and weighs a dead body down with them anyways. And then it never comes up ever again.
And then the weird thing of like, the sharks must have chewed through the rope or something. I'm like, no, that's not how this works.
They don't use that to pin the murder on him. They use the gun. Columbo, like, where's the thing in front of the fireplace? I don't have one. I forgot about that whole thing because it ends up not mattering. It actually doesn't affect the thing at all, which is super weird because they have him mention it when he's at his house, and then they have this whole thing of him, like, dragging it out of the water, and it's like, so is this not part of this then? Yeah, I understand why you don't like this episode, because I am in 100% agreement with you. This episode is really not good.
Interestingly enough, the writer of this, John T. Duggan, will write another episode, which I'm not going to say it's the best episode, but it's definitely a lot better. With that one, it's another Robert Culp. And James Gregory's in it.
Okay, my interest is definitely peaked now.
So he's definitely rich. You know, you talked about that big house that he's in. You know, he's skimming money because of the contracts and stuff. But it is interesting that he's a military guy rather than like an industrial type guy. He still is a rich asshole at the end of the day. So that whole idea of undermining the rich, having the shabby detective come in and taking this guy down, it still fits. But I think, well, we will get some more military stuff as we go along. There's one with Patrick McGowan that is particularly fantastic. But generally, I don't think of the military as being rich, but I guess they are still very much a power, very much a powerhouse that Columbo is going to be running up against.
That was kind of my interpretation, is like, this dude's pride is what gets him in trouble. His job just happens to be military. But like, this is like a whole, ego rich person, and then that they just mix the military into it. I mean, I don't know. I felt like Eddie Albert would have been just a believable rich dickhead. Like, they didn't have to do the military angle, because it ultimately doesn't go anywhere. I mean, this fucking gun. This gun. You just can't part with this gun. But he, like you said, but he does part with the gun. Like,
actually, now that I think of it, I can think of one other military one, which is actually one of the reboot episodes, if I remember correctly, but it's actually pretty good. So don't dread the reboot. You're going to find that there are some occasional good ones in there, because I know some people are just like whole cloth, all the reboot sucks. We are not entering the Night Stalker with...
I was about to say, Stuart Townsend.
We're not entering Stuart Townsend Night Stalker territory.
Look, I understand where people are coming from with that, but at the same time, this is not, like, the show when it comes back, it still has Peter Falk. It's still Columbo. It's just new Columbo. N-U. Like, new metal, new Columbo.
N-E-U? Yeah.
I was saying N like you with an umlaut on it.
Ooh,
like,
I like that.
Columbo.
Nice.
Like new Pepsi or new Coke. Coke tastes different. The proximity to other good episodes also hurts this episode, because everything up until this point has been really good. Sounds like everything after this for a while is probably going to be good too. So that doesn't help a bad episode look any better when it's sandwiched between two really good episodes. So,
well, in the next episode, to give a little tease, it is, I don't want to say it's one of my favorites, but there are definitely some things in there that are just amazing, including the very final shot of the next episode. It is a mind blower for me. So good.
And who doesn't love Don Amici?
I forgot that he's in there. He's barely in there. It is Ross Martin is our villain in that one, and he is terrific. Pay attention to Vic Tayback, mostly known as Mel on Alice, but he is wonderful as a beatnik artist.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you'll love it.
Everything ties back to Alice, really. I think that's what we're learning here. Everything ties back to that show with Wentworth from Barney Miller. I am always excited to watch more Columbo. Even as not good as this episode was, it was still a pretty good episode of television.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
even
bad
a bad
episode of Columbo.
Yeah, still pretty good.
Better than most good episodes of other TV shows. Because other TV shows, they don't have Peter Falk.
And they don't have a veritable who's who of early, mid, late, and then 2000s character actors. So,
Chris, when this comes out in June, what is going to be happening with you?
I guess over the Culturecast, we're going to be doing Just Buy Your June. Culturecast.com. Culture with a K, cast with a C. That's where you can find that. cstachu.com, cstachiw.com. Bunch of other things I work on. Stuff with Mike and Father Malone, a good friend of ours. Work on all kinds of stuff. You can find that there. What about you, Mike? Where can people find you when you're not talking about what I assume is one of your favorite TV shows, if not your favorite TV show?
When I'm not talking about Columbo, I am over at the Projection Booth Podcast, which oddly enough is available at projectionboothpodcast.com. And I'll be doing an episode over there. It's a bunch of very disappointing movies, or some movies that disappointed people. Popeye is kicking off the month, and then we're wrapping up with Super Mario Brothers, including you, Chris. You're going to be on that episode.
It's a me.
Hopefully it's turning into one of those epic episodes, so stay tuned.
I cannot wait. If you have never listened to a Projection Booth episode before, first, go change that. And second, know that Mike does episodes that are in length quite daunting to listen to, let alone putting together on our end. Because I stopped doing it after a while because of how much work it is. But Mike White is carrying that torch for the rest of us because he's the one willing to do the work.
So we are going to conclude this episode with an interview. We are talking with David Martin Jones, who is the author of Columbo, Paying Attention 24/7. It is a very scholarly look at Columbo and the commodity of attention. Really recommend it. If you're not into scholarly stuff, I would say still check it out. It's not too tough to get into. Very interesting. And I hope that you enjoy this interview.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror. We'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Are you a film fan who loves the ultimate home video experience? Look no further than The Disconnected. Your host, Ryan Verrill, is your go-to source for the latest and most accurate information on home video releases, exclusive interviews with industry insiders and filmmakers, and has established a thriving community where every film and physical media enthusiast feels welcome. From hidden gems to blockbuster hits, The Disconnected brings you insider knowledge and a welcoming space to share your love of cinema. Watch every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific for the live announcements show and follow The Disconnected on social media to stay updated. Subscribe to The Disconnected on YouTube or on the podcast provider of your choice and dive into a world where every movie night is an adventure.
Professor David Martin Jones, how did you come to be in academia, sir?
If you think about the stereotype, at least in the United Kingdom, of the university scholar, you might think of someone who went to Oxbridge, the name we give for Oxford and Cambridge, perhaps someone who went through the public school system. That's not all scholars, but that would be the stereotype. So then, if you have that type in mind, it would be a bit of a surprise that someone like myself has made it into academia. I suppose I'm what we call in the UK lower middle class. And in terms of education, I went to a fairly ordinary comprehensive school. In fact, there was evidence soon after I left that it was not a very good school, really. And very few people left in terms of the proportion of students with good qualifications. And I was very lucky. Some very kind teachers went beyond their role, really, to help me. And this book, Columbo, Paying Attention 24/7, is dedicated precisely to those teachers for going above and beyond to help me. And I went on to university from that school. So from that background, I feel that getting into academia required a lot of work. And in some ways, this is why I feel I identify with Columbo, because in some ways, perhaps I do and don't belong here. There's lots of other people like me, but in some ways I do and don't belong here. And a lot of what I do through hard work. So there's this scene when Columbo meets the big brainiacs in the episode, The Bye-Bye Sky High IQ Murder Case. And there's a lovely quote in it, and I included it in the book in the conclusion. And I'm just going to read that out. And this is how I sort of feel that I'm lucky to be in academia and why I connect with someone like Columbo. And he says, all my life, I kept running into smart people. In school, there were lots of smarter kids. And when I first joined the force, sir, they had some very clever people there. And I could tell right away that it wasn't going to be easy making detective as long as they were around. But I figured if I worked harder than they did, put in more time, read the books, kept my eyes open, maybe I could make it happen. And I did. And I really love my work, sir. And so this is why I think, or one of the reasons why Columbo really resonates with me. This constant desire to learn in particular, which was a big part of the analysis I did of the show in the book, but also this sense he has that you don't start out in this world on a level playing field. Now, I don't think I came from a deprived background or anything like that. I came from a kind of an ordinary background. But what we see in The Murderers and the duels they have with Columbo is that he's constantly pointing out this difference that we live in an unequal world. And so for me, getting into academia, well, that was my own journey, and I'm glad I made it. But it was about really putting in the hours and really trying hard. And that's what I found really engaging about Columbo.
So how did you come to write the book?
I was watching this show for fun, as I think many Columbo fans do. As it goes, Mrs. Columbo, my wife, she bought me a big box of DVDs, and I was just watching them in the evening or whenever, and I was watching them out of order, and I just picked one randomly and watch it. And that was fascinating because I had no intention of writing a book. I was just enjoying the show. Then I started to notice common points across the decades. And this happens if you're an academic who works in study of film and TV. You just do this. It's what you're trained to do, so you do it. And somehow you could destroy the thing you love. But actually, I find in Columbo, I didn't. I started to notice points across the decades that made me really stop and think. And some of these things kept reappearing, such as, how do we perform? How does Columbo perform? But how do we perform when starting to see throughout the show that, everything is increasingly being recorded. We live in a world that's duplicated by a recording of it. And how does he perform? Well, he performs this kind of innocence, doesn't he? This faux naivety, and to keep the murderers on their toes or catch them off guard. What he's really doing, in a way, is he's performing innocence, rather like the murderers are performing innocence. And when he catches them out in their performance, it's rather like a theatre critic, isn't it, saying, I notice you've broken character there. There's some really obvious ones where I think it's Candidate for Crime, he says at one point, he says, well, that's really interesting, your reaction, because I thought you'd be relieved by me bringing you this news. And suddenly the murderer stops because he realizes he's given himself away. Again, in Dagger of the Mind, the Shakespearean couple, when they're performing their alibi of what happened that night and why they're innocent, Columbo says, well, that's really amazing, because when Mrs. Columbo and I, when we start to think about the past, we never have the same memory of it at all. But with you guys, it's as if he doesn't say you've read the same script, but he's pointing out that they're performing. And then he leaves and you see their faces drop because they realize they've been caught out by this theatre critic. So the first thing was about performance, and it's fascinating to delve into when I was writing the book, how Falk performs and the different influences on him, from the method acting through the live TV work and his independent film work and his comedy. And that was really interesting because that all sort of meshes together into the Columbo faux performance of innocence. But other things kept repeating as well. How obsessed Columbo is with the accuracy of the past. Again, this relates to the fact that society is being recorded more and more, because we often see him poring over videotapes of what happened in the past, history effectively. And he's trying to find the anachronism or the fault in this recording of the past that would indicate that there's someone tampering with history and recording it incorrectly to give themselves a false alibi. So this idea of Columbo as the policeman of history, we think he's the policeman of class, but ultimately what he's looking at, what he's obsessed with, is the past and making sure it's accurate. So he's the policeman of history, comes across the decades as well. But the third thing that I found fascinating that kept coming across in the different episodes was about learning. And Columbo he's learning all the time. What's he learning about? Often it's lifestyles other than his own. He's fascinated by the lives of the rich and famous, of course. And there's that sense that a celebration of lifestyles in California being showcased in the show. Look what's possible in West Coast USA now. But his learning very often is about something specific, and that's technology. Even when he's learning about a new lifestyle, it may well be that he needs to learn about technology. And at the beginning of the chapter on that, chapter 4, I even put a list, which you shouldn't really do in an academic book, but I just thought you have to see this list. the number of items of technology that he engages with to learn about. And it goes from pacemakers through different phone systems, through the fax and the introduction of the fax is given in about a minute of screen time, until we get to the end, it's ground-penetrating radar. This sense of Columbo as a man engaged with modernity marks him out as what we would now call the entrepreneur of the self, the kind of person who knows that to keep pace with society and the changes of technology that influence his working life, after all, if he can't understand these, he can't solve the crimes. Then he must keep pace so he doesn't become obsolete. So this idea of Columbo as the entrepreneur of the self is very easy to see in contrast with, say, something like Mannix, another show written by Lincoln Levison, just before Columbo. And in Mannix, he's often pictured with a bank of these lovely, now very period-looking 60s and 70s computers behind him. And the computers whir and the lights flash, and then they produce some little cards for Mannix. And Mannix's job in the show really is to sort of throw them in the bin and say, we'll never catch the criminal with those. And then Mannix has to go out and catch the criminal himself because he's a man of action. And the message from Mannix is, there is new technology coming, guys, but don't worry, because that thing we had before, that rugged masculinity, which is still evident in something like manufacturing industry at that time, that's the thing that's going to win the day. Don't worry about these computers. We still need men of action. That kind of masculinity is still upheld. And then in Columbo, it's very different. Often we see him against the background of computers, again, whirring away and the tapes going around in reels and the lights flashing. But in Columbo, he has to learn about, he can't ignore them. And there's this sense by the time we get into the 70s and onwards that technology is becoming a much more important part of this world and a new kind of relationship is needed with it. And the most famous scene, I think, and the fans talk about it all the time, and I love it as well, is the Tricon Delta 214 scene, in which Columbo needs to learn to stand and wait while the computer gets his data for him. And there's nothing he can do. He can make sarcastic comments and, be impatient, but he's just going to have to wait for the computer. And the montage in that scene really shows us that, paying attention at the tempo of the computer. And then just after that, he goes and makes a phone call. And down the end of the phone receiver, he hears a voice and he thinks he's talking to a person. So he starts talking, but it's actually an automated voice. And then he realizes this. So suddenly you get this idea that the world has changed. Computers are almost like this alien presence that's sort of taken over somehow. And our job now is shifted. We're not Mannix anymore. We're Columbo now. We need to learn about them, and we're going to have to take our tempo from them. So across these different recurring features, I kind of started to realize that what Columbo is about is how we learn to pay attention to our world, how we learn to perform in it, how we learn to police it, and police history in particular, and how we learn to coexist with the technology which orders our world, our sort of 24/7 world of capitalism, the technology that is everywhere and records everything and that we have to engage with. And this is a world which, during the later decades of the 20th century, transformed, but not just because of technology, because of larger geopolitical events as well. And initially, you see this in the Columbos of the 70s, we were taught by shows like Columbo to pay attention. And the reason for that was national security, really, because this was the Cold War still. And we see this very clearly in Identity Crisis from the mid-1970s, which is this story about people with fake identities and surveillance. Even Columbo's house gets bugged. And in this, he meets the head of the CIA, and the head of the CIA says to Columbo, I want you to pay strict attention. And that's where we get this idea that, yes, our job is to learn, like Columbo, to pay attention, but the reason for that is because of this geopolitical situation. It's the Cold War. By the time we get to the Reagan era and the reboots of Columbo, we are still taught to pay attention. But now the reason is different. The reason is to do with something sometimes called the attention economy, which is a debatable idea. But the idea is that we, nowadays we're all working at our screens all the time, and our worth is how much attention people pay to us. And you see this in things like social media and the number of likes people get and this kind of thing, influencers and so on. And we see it very clearly in Columbo Cries Wolf in the very early 90s, where the Bachelor's World magazine, the share price of this rises simply because Columbo is paying attention to it, bringing the media spotlight onto it. So we see this idea very much shift that, yes, we're still supposed to pay attention, but now the reason for doing so is different. The monetization of attention. So the genesis of the book was in watching repeatedly and trying to understand how Columbo engages in how we shape and pay attention to our world. But where it took me really was I thought about the 20th century and why Columbo is so popular now, why it's still important to us, and how it leads us to think about our contemporary world, and in particular, the monetization of attention.
Yeah, that is fascinating, the way that you're using Columbo as a lens to focus on attention as commodity. And I had never really thought about that before, but you bring such interesting insights into just how important and how valuable attention is, especially in our 2022 world.
This idea of the attention economy, it's debatable, because the people who sort of said we now live in an attention economy, attention is the most important thing. They were people who had a vested interest in saying that kind of thing. The most nuanced scholarship on this probably suggests we live in an attention ecology, which is a much more interesting way of thinking about it. But the idea that our attention is shaped differently at different times and different periods of history is quite well known. Scholars like Jonathan Crary have written about it for a very long time. You can just think about, how cities changed during the Industrial Revolution and onwards, and modernity shaped us to start, watching cinema screens and these kinds of different ways of paying attention. But what was fascinating about engaging with attention in the Columbo book was trying to figure out what the beginning of Columbo means and why Columbo is so popular. We all know who done it. So why on earth do we pay attention to the show? So I was trying to understand this. Why should we pay attention when we already know who'd done it? And in the end, the answer came to me because I was playing games with my family. These might be memory games, especially the electronic game Simon from the 1980s, if you remember. That's still around. It's one of those kind of retro games. And detective games like Clue, or in the UK we call that one Cluedo. And Columbo, I realized, is a bit like a game. And it's like a game that resets each time. So it's kind of like a puzzle game. And this is no revelation really for scholars of TV, because television loves games. Not only do we watch more sport than anything else, but, the game show is a massive phenomenon. And, detective shows are in effect games that ask you to engage. So I thought, well, all right, really put my thinking cap on. What type of game is Columbo if it's a game about attention? What kind of game is it? And in the end, I realized it's a bit like this game, Kim's Game. And this is a game that I think a lot of people will have played. It's very simple. It's actually a game that was used to train spies. It might be used to train snipers, people who really have to pay attention and with great rapidity. And you have a tray and you put 10 different objects on it. Anything you like, a spoon, a toy, whatever you like. You cover it with a tea towel or some kind of cloth, whip the tea towel back, get a few seconds to look at the 10 objects, put the tea towel back over it, and then you've got to write them down. So this is a game of honing attention, absolutely. And I think Columbo is a bit like that, because at the beginning you see the murder, and that's like the revelation of the tray. Right, here's your objects, pay attention. How many can you remember? Quick, the murder's over. Right, now you've got to watch the rest of the show and see how many of those things you can remember and how they're influencing Columbo in this investigation. And I felt that this idea of Columbo being a bit like a game that resets each time. So it's rather like any game you like tic-tac-toe or something like that. You can see the grid, and it's going to be the same grid every time, but what happens inside the grid is going to change a little bit every time. And I think this makes sense of Columbo and why we go back to it, because we know the formula. It's not only that we know who done it, but we also know the formula. It's very straightforward. But yet we go back time and time again to watch, and as fans we go back and watch episodes over and over again, because they're honing our attention, because we're trying to, can you remember it better this time and play the Kim's Game? And this makes sense to me of all these inconsistencies in Columbo, especially the different facts about his family, this family that's really too huge to really exist like that. And the fact that Mrs. Columbo, she can't possibly be the biggest fan of every single celebrity he meets, and yet she seems to be. And this is really interesting, because in the debates around cult TV, we usually go back to Umberto Eco, this very famous Italian scholar, who said, I think in the 80s, about cult shows, and there's this coherent universe, the cult universe of whatever show it is you like, that allows fans to engage with it. So, Star Trek or whatever you like, you can get involved in this coherent universe as if it was real, and then you become an aficionado and know what goes on. So in cult TV debates, there's often talk of a Buffyverse, for example, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But with Columbo, there is no coherent Columbo-verse, because there's so much inconsistency across the episodes. Columbo is more like a multiverse, which would be the idea nowadays. And those inconsistencies, not just what he says about Mrs. Columbo, or whether there even is a Mrs. Columbo, which we'll never really know. But, the actors who play the different roles. So John Finnegan, for example, plays different roles. At times he's a colleague, at other times he's a former colleague, at other times he just works in different industries. And Columbo happens to bump into this man who's working in a different industry. Oh, it's John Finnegan again. Then we get these inconsistencies like Bob Dishy, the actor, playing a character in once in the original 70s and once in the 80s, 90s. And, it's a detective and colleague of Columbo, but it's got different names each time. But it doesn't really matter to us when we're watching it, because we're just trying to understand the game of that particular episode. And this is a game that resets each time. So when we hear reference of Mrs. Columbo, it doesn't matter that it's inconsistent. It's just important that we've heard the Mrs. Columbo reference. And each time we press reset, as I say, the game is different. So at the beginning of each episode, we must pay attention and start to see if Columbo can then pay attention to the same clues that we're shown. So initially we are set as like the witness to the crime. And then a little bit later on, we become almost like a work shadow to the investigator. So watching Columbo is a bit like watching a game of Clue or Cluedo, and knowing already who did it. It's Colonel Mustard with the pipe in the drawing room, but it's watching the other people figure out how they did it, and do they understand the clues well enough to get it. And that's interesting that we're initially the innocent witness, and then we're the sort of not the investigator, but the person shadowing the investigator, because the show goes out of its way to make this point that innocent people are people who watch. Innocent is watching. And on a couple of occasions, Columbo arrives at a crime scene. He's looking to try and figure out who his suspects might be. So he's looking for alibis. On a couple of occasions, people say, well, at the time, I was just watching TV. And even though that's no alibi at all, he's not bothered about that. He's just, okay, it can't be you. And that's kind of striking, isn't it? And usually these are people who are, we would say in the UK, below stairs. They're serving classes, butlers and maids and so on. And the reason he's not interested in them is because he knows that they probably were watching telly and they probably are innocent, because the people who have the ability to edit history are usually the wealthy. And often it's used as a sort of a technological access to technology enables you to edit the past because you've got the money for the technology. But these people are trying to do something different. They're trying to give the illusion of watching, the illusion of innocence. The most obvious one is The Most Dangerous Game, where the man, I think he's the owner of the football team. He's in the box watching the game, and then he sneaks out dressed as an ice cream man without cracking a single smile, and sneaks off to do the murder, sneaks back, and all the time creates this illusion that he was just watching. So he's one of the innocent. He's watching. Really, he isn't. He's doing something else and trying to give that illusion. So the innocent watch. We as spectators, we are positioned along with the innocent. This, I think, is what's really interesting about Columbo for me. In an era of fake news, in an era in which people are trying to tell us history didn't happen the way we think it did, there's something here about Columbo saying, pay attention. It's our job, the everymen, like Columbo, everymen and women, I apologize, to pay attention to the way history is constructed. And I think that's the message that Columbo gives us for the 21st century, even though it's really about what happened in the end of the 20th century when we move towards the neoliberal globalized economy we live in now of 24/7 attentive labor.
I really appreciate how much time you spend talking about Falk as Columbo and the performance that Falk is giving us as Columbo and just where that performance came from. I was rereading last night the whole idea of how different he is in that first pilot versus when he meets up against Lee Grant, and how he has changed and has already become that shabbier detective just between those two pilots.
Researching Columbo's, the construction of the Columbo character by Falk was absolutely fascinating. It's very difficult to talk about acting in TV. People try and they keep trying, but the seminal definition is it's very difficult because it's this kind of messy human aspect of TV. It's much easier to talk about the technology and the color and all the rest of it, but the human actor is really difficult. And what Falk does to perform Columbo is this wonderful mix of these different parts of his background. And it's well known to the fans that he wanted to get into the actor's studio and he loved the method, and Brando was his hero. And it's well known, but he clearly is not doing the method when he's doing Columbo. he's got sort of elements of it in there. Some of the little tweaks of the performance around mannerisms, maybe, but really he's more, something about his character is very comedic, isn't it? So I think Volk's Columbo is probably more like some of these great performances by people like Buster Keaton or these great Hollywood silent comedians. So if you see the scene where he runs down the bank in a sort of a Californian valley, and it's hilarious, and everyone knows this one. He loses control halfway down, his face changes, and then he ends up in a heap. But he ends up in a heap right where he should be. That's where the camera is. He's right center frame. Very controlled, but that kind of slapstick element of Columbo, and that's Death, right, isn't it? With everything from him coming in disheveled and needing coffee and interrupting people, that's all very mannered form of comedy. But with that, we add, I think, some of the mannerisms he probably picked up from live television, where you've just got to perform your psychological character in a certain way. And then, of course, all the great stuff he did with the indie director, John Cassavetes, and the way that Cassavetes would sort of surprise actors and make them perform in character. And Columbo was well known for doing that, playing pranks on his co-stars and that kind of thing. So it was wonderful to dig into all this, but really try and see how it all comes together to help him catch criminals. And it is a very different Columbo, isn't it? From the first pilot, if we can call them pilot, the first pilot to the second pilot. In the TV movie, at the beginning, he's a very sort of serious and buttoned down Columbo, isn't he? And he's not got any of the comedy whatsoever. But by the time he's dueling with Lee Grant in the second pilot, you see the Columbo proper emerge. And we see this a lot, don't we, with TV shows that, they're going to get a broader audience if it's a bit lighter. So something like Sex and the City was quite dark and broody and noirish at the beginning, and then it's a comedy, and suddenly that's much more popular. That makes sense. So we can see it in this very sort of populist way, but really in the remake, we see that a sense of Columbo using this mixture of attitudes to discombobulate, this faux naivety that comes through is a very controlled performance. So we see Falk performing Columbo, and we see Columbo performing this fake innocence to catch the detective. And Lee Grant basically says it to him, doesn't she? In that there's a remake of the exact same scene from the first pilot, remade in the second one. She says it's always Columbo, isn't it, bumbling and stumbling along. It's always the judge that he's after, and he's delighted, isn't he? Sort of plays it like, he says, "Oh, who, me? No." Wonderful moment. So I think for me, the reason we watch Columbo, actually, I can say it's a game and all these things, but it's Falk, isn't it? It's Falk and the murderer. That's what takes you there every time.
This whole idea, too, of paying attention 24/7 to the title of your book, the idea of Columbo always working. You brought up that quote from the Sky High IQ case. Yes, he's going to work harder than anybody, but it feels like he has no life outside of being a detective, that he doesn't even have a first name. He is just Lieutenant Columbo. I was rewatching Dead Weight last night, and to see him hanging out at Bert's at 11 o'clock, watching the news with Bert, it's like, wow, aren't you going to go home and see the wife and watch the news there? No, he is always working.
Even when he goes home, he's still working. He talks about how he was up late at night in bed with Mrs. Columbo, and suddenly it came to him. Or he says, I need to go home and talk to the wife. Or he says, or rather, what I need to do is I'll go home and I'll talk about the case, and then it'll come to me. And other aspects of the cases, they come from his family, like the poison ivy, from a member of the family and so on. So there's this sense that work has invaded his life, such that, yes, he might be at Bert's at 11. I think in one case he's in the office at 2 a.m. and a call comes in. Even when he goes home, the family is another way of helping you understand the cases. Not only is his name Lieutenant, so he says, but also the two times we think we see his home, it's not their sets or, rented shelves of someone else's house. And there's this sense that does he have a home, or does he just work 24/7? And this idea, I think, relates to something broader in this, which is that the public sphere here is the private sphere here is invaded by Columbo himself. So he's the law, and yet he just walks into people's houses without warrants. He bothers them and pests them all the time. So there's this sense that there is no escape from the public sphere. Your private sphere is not yours. And somehow what's happened to Columbo, he's had to give up the private life to work is also what's happening to everyone. We're no longer sort of given that privacy in our own homes because the law can just invade, or at least that's the kind of universe we get in Columbo, this almost Kafkaesque world, really, where we're always guilty before the law if Columbo thinks we are.
Yeah, I'm thinking of those episodes where he leaves California, but yet he's still always working, whether it's the murder on the ship where we never see Mrs. Columbo, or his trip down to Mexico. Even when he was away from home, he was still working.
Even on vacation, he's working. There's no escape from work whatsoever. Yeah. And if you look at the other shows around the time, I think Macmillan and Wife is the other one where they take that, have the same idea, because Macmillan and Wife, quite early on, they're moving into their new home, and one of the sort of the baddies from the era sort of invades them in their home and tries to kill them there. So there's that same sense, I think, of the idea that work is 24/7 and it's dissolved public and private, but also that threat of criminality might be. So there's some sort of excusing of the fact that detectives can also go into people's homes.
Yeah, even in that Dead Weight episode, at one point he goes up to his house and the other officer says, well, I don't have a warrant. And he's like, well, I'll just go up and ask if I can come in. No worries whatsoever. No need to go up that legal tree.
Sex and the Mad Detective, isn't it? He's in the suspect's house and he makes it look like he's walked out and closed the door behind him. I think it's that episode anyway. And then you hear the door shut off screen. And then he comes back and he's still in the house, and that, incredibly invasive. And there's other examples as well, aren't there? One of the suspects give him a key to his house and says, well, why don't you go and look around? And Columbo does. He sort of falls asleep and he's found in the suspect's house in the morning.
Do you remember what was the first episode of Columbo you really remember watching?
It's a good question, because I think I was watching afternoon matinee reruns in my teen years, probably. So I think I got used to the idea of Columbo rather than distinct episodes of Columbo. So perhaps I was consuming Columbo like you would consume Poirot or something like that. There's this detective figure and then you're watching a Columbo. But it's that usual thing with TV. It's on in the background. And one of the wonderful things about Columbo is the way it uses voice to draw your attention to it at the key moments. And we know television does this. Television is an attention-grabbing medium because it's aware that you're doing other things in the room, whether it's ironing or your homework or talking with your family or whatever it is. So it needs to grab your attention. So theme tunes are great ways to do that, especially upbeat ones for action shows. Candle After, that's an obvious one, and it's something funny is going on. But in Columbo, it's more like the origins of TV. TV is not what scholars argue. TV is not the cinema shrunk down into your home. TV is the radio in the corner with images. So it hails you more like the radio does. This is what scholars have argued for many decades. Columbo is brilliant in that respect because his catchphrase, just one more thing, sir, or ma'am, this is done in such a way, it's sort of milked and hammed, and to the point where there's this pregnant pause afterwards. You look up at that point. This is a key moment. He's gonna get the murderer here. If you watch shows of the era, the same phrase is used by scriptwriters because that's what detectives say. There's just one more thing, but they never deliver it in the same way. I caught it on a couple of shows. Quincy was one, and another I can't remember now. But yeah, I heard it and I thought, well, that's really interesting because it just passes by. But Columbo, the way Falk delivers it is to get your attention to that point. So I suppose I don't remember which Columbo episode I remembered for a title during all those teen years. I think I was just watching a Columbo, but the way it was drawing me in, I think, tells us a lot about television generally.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Mostly books take many years when you're not writing them as well. So there might be a couple of years where it's gestating as an idea, or you maybe don't even know you're writing a book on it yet. And then you write it. And then at the end, there's this long period where it's with the publisher and it comes back to you for tweaks and so on. So that adds another year on at the end. So by the time it comes out, you probably finished writing it a year ago, and you might have sort of started writing it 4 years before that. So I'm going to guess 4 or 5 years because mostly books take about that long. Yeah. With the pandemic, I think I'm not really sure if that hastened it to conclusion or slowed it down. But so part of it was during the pandemic as well. So I think that really influences how much time it takes.
I was very thankful you call out one of your readers in the book and thank them for bringing more Brecht to it. And I really appreciate that you kind of go down that Brechtian path as well.
Yes, there's that wonderful aspect of it, isn't there, with Columbo miming in particular, what I called one of my dad jokes, his mime scene investigations. He sort of performs, doesn't he, what has just happened? And there's that emphasis in the show on we are watching a performance, and the mime scenes where he's trying to figure out what happened in space. They're the obvious ones. But there's some other beautiful moments where I think it was Ben Gazzara was directing, and they used these great big mirrors in the room to show Columbo, and you're looking at the reflection of Columbo acting, but they've left the character in the front of the shot. So he's looking in one direction and you can see Columbo in the other part of the screen. And that calling attention to what's going on is very Brechtian and very interesting, helping you think about what it is you're watching and how it's being constructed. But his performance, of course, it has that whole aspect of it is constructed, and can you find the real Columbo beneath it, which is part of the joy of watching it.
What are you working on now?
It's a good question. I think my next book will be quite different. Normally, I write about a world of cinemas and films from Latin America, films from Asia. That's what I normally do, and I'm probably heading back there. This book on Columbo was a treat for me because I don't normally write about TV. I have scholars, colleagues who I work with who know TV back to front, inside out, through the ages, industrially and everything. So I was a bit of an interloper. So I'm really grateful to them because they let me, write about it. They sort of help me and help me shape the book and help me think about the ideas in the most sort of multi-dimensional way. So I'm lucky to have had a chance to write this. And I'm also very grateful to the archives who helped me find the information I needed. But yeah, I'll go back to writing about a world of cinemas and what that means.
Professor Martin Jones, thank you so much for your time. This was great.
It's been a pleasure and an honor for me. Thank you very much indeed.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies. Inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind the scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.